All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a new composition just to kind of go over the hotkey stuff first, and then we'll get into that. Okay. So some of these hotkeys we've already been kind of working on, right? So we know Control N, that's new composition. Control Y is new solid. Control Shift Y is our solid settings. Okay. Um, we've used the N key before, right? When we're down here, there it is. And the N key shortens our area. All right. So the N key shortens our work area. So if we want to stop our work area there, it stops it. And the B key right next to it stops this area. Okay, so that's our start and our end. We've used a space bar too to kind of play our animation. Some of the other keys that are very helpful when we're doing let's say we're duplicating our stuff and we want to just offset it, we can just do this, right? We just scoot these over. There's other ways we can also move these layers. If I move my ticker to any spot and I use the left bracket, it automatically jumps my work right to that spot. So wherever my ticker is, it'll automatically jump it right there, which is incredibly helpful because sometimes you're like, okay, I want to, like for instance, when we were doing our page transitions, we would go to the end of our animation, then we would grab that other bar and slide it over. We could have just hit the left bracket and it would have just stopped it over there, just jumped it right to it. That would have been obviously helpful. And then if you use the right bracket, it does it the other side. So the end of this would then go to that point. Okay. So After Effects is actually pretty smart in knowing like these two hotkeys kind of work together. So we're going to put them right next to each other. So if you typically know one of them, you're going to know the other one. Okay. Just like B and N, they're right next to each other on the keyboard. So they're going to be very similar in what they do. Okay. There we go. All right, now I'm going to just animate this real quick. So obviously the P key is for position. I'll set a keyframe. I'll pull this out. I'll go like that. Gorgeous. Okay. So now this animation doesn't actually start until right here, right? So After Effects does calculate stuff even if it doesn't see it. So right now, this chunk of frames, even though we don't see this animation, it's still calculating that specific animation for those frames, okay? Not a huge deal when we're dealing with something simple like our page transitions, but when we get into something more complex like our lower thirds, our Angry Birds, or any of the other stuff, it can be very cumbersome on the system. So remember, left bracket moves our entire layer over. So if I were to hit left bracket, it moves the whole layer over. So my keyframes also moved. I didn't want to do that. If I hold down Alt and I use left bracket, it chops it. Okay. So again, a really nice one is Alt and left bracket because it chops that layer, so we don't see any of that layer beforehand. So then After Effects will then work much quicker because it doesn't need that extra information. Also, it's going to be a lot easier for you to see actually what's going on if you don't have 1,000 layers all starting at the same point. I've seen plenty of this type of thing where people have all of these layers. And if I were to just grab these keyframes and move them here and these keyframes there, okay? Now it's difficult once these things are collapsed to actually see like where's the animation? Where's the difference in all of these layers? But once I start going into the layers and I cut them to exactly where they start, and let's just pretend for the sake of this that this one goes off screen, and then I cut them where they're ending, I'll know exactly, I'll know exactly where this animation is, okay? And that'll make it easier for me to kind of line things up because that's the animation, just that little clip. I don't need the entire bar for that, not only for speed, but also for workflow. So Alt left bracket cuts the left side, Alt right bracket will cut the right side. Okay, so those are obviously on here under the this area right there. Another thing that's kind of helpful, and some of these depend on what you're doing, and eventually we'll get to, you'll pretty much use all of these at some point. Sometimes you need a marker. Like let's say that I have some keyframes set on here. Here's a keyframe, there's a keyframe, there's a keyframe, there's a keyframe, okay? Now, I don't want to show all of my keyframes on here, but I do want some sort of indicator to say that you have keyframes at specific spots. Maybe I'm trying to sync something up or whatever. So I can use the asterisk. So on your numeric keypad, there's an asterisk key. And if I just go to any of these spots and I hit the asterisk, you'll see that it's putting a little ticker right inside of my right inside the layer. So these little ticks right here are great ways to add little call outs of things that may be happening. Maybe at one point in my animation, I want a particle explosion to happen. Okay, and so if I have that ticker there, I can have it specifically set up. I could even go to the settings for that ticker and I could call it something. So I could say explosion. Okay, and then it'll say explosion in there, and that way I can see that's where the explosion is. So again, it's a really neat way to be able to kind of mark different areas of things that we want to happen. You can also move them by alt dragging it and control clicking it to remove it. Um, Previous keyframe, that's a good one too. Going to different keyframes. So typically what you're doing is you're moving this, right? That's what we've been doing so far. Just I want to move to this keyframe, I move to that keyframe and change it. You can use J and K to jump between all your keyframes. If you're trying to get to a specific spot and you're like, I need to edit this keyframe, very easily you can do that. One reason you typically wouldn't want to just glide, like doing this, is sometimes, let's say I'm zoomed way far out here, I go, okay, it's about there, and then I move this over here. What happened is I have two keyframes super close to each other, like within one frame. And so now I get this. Boop. Okay? Because I wasn't right on top of that. Then I have to zoom in, and then I have to say, oh, that's the wrong keyframe. Whoops. There we go. So now I deleted the old keyframe, and now I have just the correct keyframe on there. Okay? So J and K are, again, helpful keyframes, especially in stuff we've done so far. It's kind of simple. As we get more keyframes in our timeline, we'll definitely be using J and K to kind of jump between them. Layer in point, layer out point, that's no big deal. O and I, those jump you to the end. It jumps your time marker to the end of that specific one. Again, something that can be helpful if you're trying to line things up. Okay, so if I bring this back here, I duplicate it a couple times. Let's say I go to this one. I say I'm going to move to the out point, and I'm going to use my left bracket to move it there. Go to the out point, click on this one, left bracket. Go to the out point, click this one, left bracket. Go to the out point, click this one, left bracket. And now you'll see that all of these are perfectly lined up with each other. Okay, very easily to do that instead of just trying to click each one and get them perfectly lined up. It does it pretty much for me. Okay, so those are like the major keyframe things that you make sure you want to play with. Some of these other ones, like purging all your memory, we probably won't run into this yet. Eventually, what's going to happen is After Effects, every time we're doing these things, every time we hit play, you'll see this green bar going across. The green bar is basically every single frame, it's saving it to your computer somewhere in this cache, in this memory area. And what happens is after working for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, the computer will actually start to slow down because there's like so much information being written. Uh, right. Well, I don't think so because you just booted your computer, so it should be fresh. It crashed again. There might be something else going on with that one. So on here, where's my stuff? Inside your documents, inside Adobe, this is like where it saves a lot of your files. In this case, I really don't have a lot going on, but sometimes you may have gigabytes of files just like sitting in your computer, not really doing anything. So you can use the hotkey for purging, or if you go to Edit Purge, you can say purge all your memory in disk cache. That's the disk cache. Purge just your memories, purge just your undos, purge your image cache. When you do this, you can see from here, it's going to delete 4 gigs of hard drive space. That's 4 gigs that's saved to my hard drive that is just like sitting there doing nothing right now. So it's going to delete all that stuff, and then my computer will run a little bit faster. And for this, it's not going to do a whole lot. On our later assignments, it definitely will. I'll show you one of our more advanced assignments. Desktop, B drive. Fall, where are you at? There you are, 500. Let's see this one. So this is going to be like probably one of our biggest assignments. Because we have a lot of stuff going on with this one. So in here, I have stuff brought in from, look at all the compositions that I have right there on the left. And then under my layers, here's all these different layers that I brought in from Illustrator. Part of these are for the Angry Bird dude right here, right there. And then part of them are from the background, so all the background elements. Plus I have a bunch of textures that I'm using for the different looks of this stuff. And then if I rewind this to the beginning and hit play, you'll see how slow this is going to kind of go. And now as I hit play, you can see how slow this is going. Because every single element on it has all this other stuff. It takes memory. It takes time for to calculate what it's supposed to do. Plus, it's kind of like a fake 3D, so there's actually some like lighting in here, and there's some fake shadows. So you can see how slow this is going to go. As I'm working on this, it goes incredibly slow because I really want to tweak everything and make sure it looks perfect. You'll even see that my resolution is set to 1/4, meaning that my size is like this big, but it's only rendering out to be like that big, okay? And that way it goes even a bit quicker. If I set this to full, it would go like 10 times slower, okay? So you can see the green bar is loading up, loading up, loading up. And pretty soon we'll be at the end. All right, so now we should be playing this back in real time with some sound. Wonderful. Okay, now just so you can see it, let's say I set this to full and I go to a frame. This blue bar down here was it loading that frame, it calculating what that frame's supposed to look like. So now I'm going to hit play. And this is how slow it's going to go. Okay, at that full resolution, it goes like super duper slow. All right, so this is where it's loading and loading and loading all of those things. Imagine your Photoshop file is this big. Well, for every single frame that we have here, we have basically that Photoshop file. Okay, so for this 17 frame or 17-second animation times 30, do the math and figure out it's like 600-ish frames. Okay, so if I go to purge now, let's just see for fun. 348 megabytes just from me opening this file and hitting play a couple times. That's how much memory has been eaten up. Now you take that over this entire semester. Every project, if you never purge your stuff, your hard drive is going to get full pretty quick. All right, so just some things to keep in mind as we progress and as we start going on to our assignment stuff. Okay, so now I'm going to show the blippity stuff, the title sequence. So I'm making a new composition. Okay, so there's nothing going to be really crazy out of the ordinary here. It's just going to be just applying the things in maybe a little bit different manner. Okay, so the same stuff that we did last time, plus the page transitions, is where I'm going to go with this. So the first thing we have to keep in mind is that when we're doing an animation inside of After Effects, we don't just jump into it and start animating stuff and hope for the best, like a lot of people do. We have to think of some sort of design, some sort of look that we want to have for our stuff. So I created a very simple design a couple semesters ago, and it's just very nice because it's just very clean and effective. So I'm going to make a new solid, okay? Now, you may have noticed before, like in our page transitions, we had transparency, right? So that bottom layer was always, as no layer here, it's just transparent if we drop it into a new comp. So in this case, I don't want that. In this case, I want to have a solid color, at least like come onto the screen at some point. Or start on the screen. So I'm going to set this to my 960 by 540, and I'm going to pick my base color. Okay, and me, I like the color blue. I also like green. So those are typically the two colors I jump to. So this is my background. Now, I want this to look a little bit different. I don't want it to look just like a flat blue. I want it to have some gradation to it. I want to have some tones. So I'm going to make another new solid. And this one is going to be, it's a good time to start naming your stuff too, because now they're going to be specifically like for things, not just like transitions. This is going to be by gradation for background. Okay, the color's not going to matter because I'm going to add an effect to it. So under generate, I'm going to do a 4-color gradient. And a 4-color gradient, by default, is pretty ugly. Okay, you get these colors in here, and it's just like, ugh. But what we can do is pick colors that kind of match what we want. So I want something that is basically in the black and white realm. So I'm going to grab some different values of black and white. There we go, something like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend this in a little bit more. Okay, so you can see by me blending it, what it does is it takes those colors that were kind of harsh, like, very obvious of where they're located. There we go. And it blends them in better so that now they blend in nicely and smoothly. I can also jitter, and what jitter does is it gives it a nice little bit of grain. Sometimes when you have any gradient, I'm sure you've seen this before, like in Photoshop or Illustrator, you print a gradient and it comes out like a nice color here and then mud and then a white color on the top or whatever. So the same thing would happen in here, basically because you don't have any intermediate values. So by adding some jitter, you get a nice little bit of grain inside your stuff, okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to show my blue, but I want my blue to have the same values as this. So I want it to be a little bit darker here, maybe a little bit lighter there, okay? So if I go to my mode here, and you can get to this if you need to by hitting the toggle switches and modes on the bottom, I'm going to take my mode and just set it to multiply. And so what that does is it takes the black and white and it multiplies it times the blue, and then we get this. So basically anything where it was dark in my gradient is going to be dark. Anywhere it was light, it's going to pretty much stay the same color. I can move these little dots around too if I need to. So let's say I wanted this color here and this color here. Okay, so I can adjust these little targets wherever I need to, just to kind of emphasize my stuff a little bit better. Okay, I'll put this one. Oh, it's too much lightness on that side. Okay, you can even go like off screen. There you go. So I just want to have some sort of variation here. This looks much more interesting, and I'm gonna let me brighten up my blue here a little bit. On the projector, it's kind of like washing it out. I'm just gonna brighten it some so maybe you can see it. Okay. You'll see the difference between like this color here, like, and that. Like there definitely seems to be something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more like design-wise, and having just a little bit of gradation in there. I could also click on that gradation and hit T, remember, for opacity, and I could lower the amount of that. So if I decide that maybe it's a little bit too dark, I can just change the opacity, and that will lower the effect of it, okay? So now we're looking at something that's maybe a little bit more like Photoshop, right? Because in Photoshop, we could do the same thing. We could start off with a solid color, drop a new layer on top of it, give it some values, and multiply it, and then adjust the opacity of that layer, okay? So that looks pleasant enough, I guess. So now what I want to do is I want to create just a little signage for my name here. So I'm going to create a rectangle. Oops. I have to make sure I click off my layers and then double click my rectangle. And I'm just going to reshape this into a box. So like 150 by 150. Maybe a little bit less. 180. There we go. 180 is good. Okay. And then I click on this, I go to my color, and then I pick a color that kind of matches. So I'm going to grab this color, but then just go with something maybe darker. And I'll go to my stroke. Make the stroke a bit more pronounced. Cool. All right. So what I'm going to do now with this shape is I'm just going to have this shape kind of like coming to the frame, like on an angle, and then like fall down, right? Kind of like it's like, woo, and then fall down. All right, so I'm going to pull it off screen. I'm going to hit position, and I'm going to hit rotate. Now before I do, before I do anything, I know that my rotate for this is going to need to come down, but I want it to come down like something square. I want it to come in like this, and then go like that. Okay. If I look at where this is pivoting from, it's pivoting from this corner. Right now it's pivoting from the center, so it's going to look weird if it comes in like this, and then the whole thing like rotates. I want it to come in and then just fall on that corner. So before I do any animation, I need to hit the Y key and move my pivot down to the bottom. So I hold Control to get it down to the bottom. So now I can animate my position and rotate. I'm going to go up to, let's say, a second. I switch back to my arrow tool with the V key, bring this into frame, and there he is. Okay. Now I want him to, like I said before, oops, and I put that in the wrong spot. Hold on. I want this to be in that corner. There we go. All right. Set my keyframes again, push this up, push it back out. Perfect. Okay. So now he comes in, whoop, like that. Okay. So now I'm going to do the rotate part. So I want him to start off like backwards a little bit, like this. Here he goes. And then when he gets here, I want the force of him like hitting that spot to make him stop and fall over. So if I just start rotating this back to where he was, what do you think is going to happen? Right, it's going to do it while it comes in, so it's going to look weird. It's going to look like he's falling, you know, like gliding in. And that's obviously not what we want. We want it to look like it's basically up and then it falls down. Now, one way we can kind of accentuate that is let's pretend that this thing is coming in like this. It wouldn't come in perfectly straight. It may actually like lean back even a little bit more as it's coming in and just kind of fall down there. So I'm going to go like to this keyframe and just push this up a little bit. And then the spot here, I'm just going to pull it back even further, like that. Okay, so if you look at my keyframes, he goes from point A to point B. That's just him moving from here to there. His rotate is back, and then it rotates back a little bit more, and then it falls down. So now, if I just set my end of my work area here, okay, so it's a bit better. All right, so now I can go in and grab my keyframes. I can do my easy ease. I can go to my speed graph. And maybe I'll edit one at a time. So let me do my position first. So I just click on position. Oops, let's go the other way. Nope, that's like way too fast. Go. Right. Initial instincts were better. There we go. Cool. Okay, now let's go to rotate. Now rotate's not going to have a huge amount of transition here, okay? As it falls down, it's going to fall down, but there's only like 3 frames that it could fall down. So I really don't need to edit the speed graph on the rotate because it's just like there in 3 frames. Okay, so I'm actually not going to edit it. I did the easy ease. I actually may pull this one off 1 more frame. There we go. So that looks pretty cool like that. Now, just so we can kind of preview it, I'm going to throw my motion blur on. And you'll see the nice little effect that we get with the motion blur is we get these nice little like blurry spots back here. Now, it's nice we get the blurry spots, but I really want to enhance that a little bit more. I really want to make it appear that this thing is moving faster than it's actually moving, okay? So this is where our little blip shapes come in because they're basically used to enhance what we've already done, enhance animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a brand new composition. Okay. Now I know that my blip shape, if you remember the ones that we did last time, for the most part, they were pretty square in shape. Okay. As far as being proportionate, we didn't really do anything that was like crazy rectangular. Everything would basically fit into a nice little square box. So that's what I'm going to do. Instead of doing 960 by 540, I'm going to uncheck my box and make it 540 by 540. Okay. And the reason for this is just like shrinking our timeline. If we don't need all this extra space, why bother having it? Why have like all these extra pixels if we're only going to use it in an area that's this tiny? It'll just make our computer go slower. So I need to create basically like a I'm sure you've seen these things before, like in anime or cartoons. When they run really fast, they have like these like streaky lines behind them, right? Kind of thing. That's what we want to create. So I'm going to create a little streaky line. In the blips that we did before, we started off with a basic shape like this. And then we use the scale tool to change the scale. We also use the trim path for some of our stuff. I'm going to use the pen tool, and I'm going to create my own shape. Okay, so I'm going to start off with this kind of like what I want the longest part to look like. Okay, so I basically want my streak to look like that, so that as this thing is moving across the screen, that's what's kind of trailing behind it is one of these things. I'm going to brighten my colors just so you can see it better. I really just make this ugly just so you can see it. That's for you guys. Cool. All right, so now we need to animate this. So if I go open my shape layer and I go open my contents and I open the shape, you'll see that there's a, instead of having rectangle or ellipse or whatever, it says path. And with path, we get this little stopwatch right here. And the stopwatch will allow us to animate that whole path. And actually animate what the shape looks like. So just to kind of play around with it for a second, if I click the stopwatch and I go up on my frames and click off that for a second and click back on the shape, path, there we go. And then I just move this, you'll see that the shape will then kind of morph into that, okay? Even if I went here and then I held down the Alt key, just like in Photoshop or Illustrator, and I started doing like that, you'll see that it'll actually morph from those shapes into the other one, okay? So this is an incredibly powerful tool because we can basically create now any shape that we want. So this is, like I said, this is like the longest it's going to be. So I definitely don't want to start off like this. I want this to kind of be the midpoint. I'm just going to move my keyframe to, let's say, like in the middle. So this middle keyframe is at its longest. The beginning keyframe is going to be everything kind of shrunk down like this. Like super tiny. Like that. Now it's going to go. And then when it comes up here a little bit further, then everything's going to be just like trailing back into this. Okay, so now it's going to go. All right, now that's horribly ugly as far as the speed goes. So we just need to speed things up. So I'm just going to shrink these in. Maybe that's too much. All right, there we go. I'm going to do my easy ease. I'm going to adjust my speed. There we go. That's pretty cool. Okay, now this is one of those things where I don't want this to really, like, at the beginning of this, if I click off, it looks weird starting right there. And if I go to the end of this, it looks weird ending up right there. But here's the thing, if I cut this so that it ends right at the end of this, we won't see any of these things. It'll literally just kind of like come into existence, do its thing, and then go out of existence. So if I just Alt left bracket this, if I click on it first, Alt left bracket it, there we go, it'll crop it right here. Now, this is inside of a composition because what I want to do is I want to bring this animation into my other one, just like we did with our page transitions, just like I showed with some of the other stuff. If I bring this in there, though, it brings in this entire composition, not just the one layer. It brings in the whole composition. So I'm going to go to my ticker here, make sure I'm at the end, and hit N, right? Because I want to crop this right to this point. Then I'm going to go to my composition and say trim comp to work area. Okay, so now I've just resized my entire comp so it fits just that animation. I'm going to go back to my project. I'm going to rename this and call this streak. Go back to my title sequence, and now I can just drop the streak into my animation. And you'll see it fits perfectly right here. That's as long as the animation is. So now if I were to rewind this and play, there it is. Okay. So now what I can do is just kind of position it. So let's say right there. I put it right about here. Okay. Now that looks weird because it's not really following it, right? It's just kind of like floating in space. So we need to make it follow it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to parent it to the object. So if I go to this area here, it says parent. And parent means like connect its movement. So when this object moves, I want this other object to move with it. So if I go to my parent here and I say you're parented to shape layer number 1. So now when I hit play, you'll see that he moves with it. Okay. Now obviously that doesn't work because now he's like moving away from it. So what I need to do is go to that spot again, move him back like that, and then rewind it. There he goes. Okay. Now maybe that's a little bit too big. Let me go back to where it's here. Let me scale it down. Let me reposition it. There we go. All right. So that looks kind of neat. Now let me go and duplicate it. So if I just take this and duplicate it, then I can put one here. I duplicate it again, and I can put one, let's say, there. And maybe I'll give them just a little bit of an offset, just so they're not all hitting at the same spot. Okay? Now, apart from the colors, which actually they kind of look neat, just being a contrasty kind of color on there, that works pretty good. Now, just so you can see it, if I were to go and rotate this guy a bit further, let's say I went crazy, these things will also like kind of streak with him. So in some cases that could work pretty good. If he's going in an arch or something, that could work really well. So it'll move wherever it moves. So if I move this way over here, all those arches or all these streaks move with it. I also want to maybe put these underneath that because it looks kind of weird being on top. Let's put that underneath. And maybe I'll move this top streak here just a little bit lower like that. There we go. Okay, so that's kind of neat how that one comes in, boop, and then does that. Now, I would like to have something happen where it hits the ground and then does like a little blip or something there too. Okay, yeah, thud or something. So I'm going to make another new composition. That's good. It's square again. I'm going to do like basically just like either some hit marks like we did last time. Remember just the trim lines coming out. Or we can do kind of like radio waves. I've seen those on old cartoons where they just have like the lines like radiating out from the center, like those. So I'm going to start off with a circle. Double click it. I'm going to go to my ellipse. I'll shrink this down to something like that. That's good. My horrible colors we'll just keep in there for now. And I'm going to do a trim path on this. And I'm going to get rid of the fill. Okay. For this one, I don't need the fill. Now, the only thing I'm using the trim path for is because I only want a portion of this. Like, maybe that much. Okay. And just to kind of keep it centered, I'll put it right there. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate this kind of coming out from that point and just going like that way. Okay. So if I look at the scale of this, that's basically what I want to do is scale this up like that. Okay. So I'm going to go to my scale. And I'm going to set this to 0. There we go. So now it's all gone. I'll set a keyframe. I'll come up a little bit. I'll set it to, let's say, 200. Maybe a little more, 300. I guess we'll do it there. 155. Okay. Like that. Okay, cool. So now I'll do my easy ease on it. Back to this, back to this. Start off really fast at the start of this and then go to really slow. There we go. Or maybe a little bit too much. I want it to kind of slow down like that. There we go. Nice. Somewhere in the middle. And what I'm doing is mentally I'm trying to picture my animation, trying to picture when it hits, and trying to find an animation that would work. So what I don't want it to do is it hits, and then for the next like 3 minutes, these things are like radiating out. Or it hits, and then it's like super quick, and we don't even see it. Okay? So you'll find that, you got to find this like sweet spot. All right, that's cool. So now I'm going to do the trick we did last time. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to offset it a frame. And then I'm going to take my track mat and set it to the alpha inverted. Okay, so now if we look at this, you'll see that it goes away. Okay, it almost goes away. There's a small line. So I just need to go to my shape 2 and make this 10 pixels. Now it goes away. Okay, so now I have my little radar line that I could then duplicate, offset, duplicate, offset. That's kind of cool. Maybe a little bit more here, maybe a little bit more there. Yeah, maybe just 2. I think maybe just 2 would work. 3 might just be a little bit too long of an animation. That's cool. All right, so now we go back to our project and we rename this to be boom, whatever we want to call it. We go to our title sequence, we drop the boom. Oops, and look at what I did. I didn't shrink this down. So you'll see that the comp is huge. I don't know where this animation is. So I'm going to jump back to boom. Here's the animation gone. I'm going to trim my layers. I'm going to set my end of my workspace, and then I'm going to trim my comp. And that will automatically update when I go back here. Now I know where the boom is. Here comes the boom. All right, where's that? Right there. Okay, so now I can move my boom over. Shrink it here, scale the whole thing down. Maybe even rotate it some. All right, so now let's take a look at this. All right, so you see how just these 2 little things that we've added, the streaks and the little boom spot, really help kind of make the animation feel a little bit more like something's going on in the scene. Okay, so then I'm going to add one more part to this, and the last part of this is I want my name or my initial to pop up in the box, and then my name to kind of come off to the side. Okay, so my initial pops up in the box, my name comes off to the side. Cool. So first thing, I go to my text tool. So if you look at your hotkey, it's Control T. You can just click and then you can type. So there's S. That's my first initial. I'll make it big. Okay. Anything that's in blue, you can just click and drag on, and it automatically creates a slider, which is awesome. Now here, the hotkey is not going to work. If I hit V to go to my hotkey, you'll see that the type V. This is the one time. It's cool just to go up there and click on it and then move it down. Okay, and then I can make this a bit bigger. Here. That's cool. Pick a different font. You know, you don't always go with the standard stuff. You know, pick something good, not bad. Oh, look at that. That's my name. Stadium. That's neat too. That's kind of okay. Cool. All right. So there's my first initial. So now I want this to just come up. I want to just be like, there's my initial inside of that box. So if I go to my initial, I hit the P key. This is where I want it to end up. So it comes in, right? It hits air, boom. And then as this thing is still going, I'm going to animate the position. So this is going to be the end of it. So I click a keyframe and just scoot it over. And then I move this down. Okay, so I basically set the end keyframe and then just moved it over. That way it just goes like that. Okay, so now what I don't want to do is I don't want my letter to be visible at all until that point. So if I know that this is where it's going to start animating, I'm going to Alt left bracket, cut it, so it starts animating there. And then I'm going to create a mask with this box. So remember before how we did that with these things here, how I used the track mat? I can do the same thing on the letter. Problem I'm going to have, though, is that when I go to this and I try to choose a track mat for my S, it's not going to show anything here because it's the top layer. It only allows you to do a track mat for the layer right above it. So if I were just to duplicate my layer, shove this on top of it, then I could go to track mat and say only allow the alpha. Okay. Now when I click that, it makes my letter disappear. But now when I hit play, okay, so what's happening is as my letter enters where that box is, it's going to be right there inside the box. Now I want to do something a little bit different because it looks kind of weird having it go above the curve or above the stroke. Like I want to like slip into the box like between the stroke and the fill. So I'm going to basically just do a little magic here. I'm going to duplicate that shape layer again. I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to turn off the fill. Okay, so now when I turned off the fill, you'll see that now there's a fill on top of, or a stroke on top of it. So I have this layer here, that's the stroke of the box. I have this one that is my mask for letter. And then I have this one that is my box. Okay, so all of these things, these four things work together in order to get everything set up the way I want it to. Now I do want to have the S have a little bit of easy ease to it. And then maybe kind of float in there after it's a little bit of speed to it. All right, maybe a little bit more room. Spread that out a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same exact thing with my name. So I want the HAUN to show up in there too. So if I go to text again, so Control T, I click this, HAUN. You'll notice that my S disappeared because what happened is I was clicked on the S layer. I started typing my new text and it got rid of that layer mask. So I have to switch the order of these. So I'm just going to put it on the very top. Here we go. Then I'm going to shrink this down. So like that much. Okay. I'm going to kind of line this up with that. There we go. All right, so I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did before. I want the S to come up, right? S. And then I want to have the HAUN come off to the side. So I'm going to Alt left bracket that to cut it. I'm going to position. I'm going to keyframe it here. That's where I want it to end. I'll just pull that up. Just pull this back. Okay. And we'll easy ease this. We'll go to that. Go to here. Speed there. Speed there. Cool. All right. So now how do I get my HAUN to disappear and only show up in this area? Use the mask, right? Okay. Now we don't have a mask for that specific area. There's no box that's over there, but very quickly I can just create a box. I can just go to my rectangle tool, nothing's clicked, and I just make a box. And I need a fill on this because it has to have something. And then all I have to do is say track mat, alpha. There we go. Boop. Awesome. Cool. Now I did, or I do, not really like the position of my name, right? So I wish my name was actually like scooted over a little bit more. If I try to scoot any of that over now at this point, it's going to kind of screw everything up because all of the stuff that's here is all kind of like linked together, right? So if I were to take this one box, here's the keyframe for it, and let's say that I moved it back. So now this box is back. Well, now the stroke doesn't go with it. Now the letter S is going to move into a different spot. That HAUN is going to move into a different spot. So you want to make sure all your stuff is kind of set up at the start of where you want it to be. Like if you have an incredibly long name, maybe kind of plan that out. Where's my name going to be in this thing, right? Luckily, my name is pretty short, so HAUN fit perfectly there. But if my name was Samantha for some reason, that wouldn't really fit. Or my lettering would be really small. Now, a way that I can get around that is if I take all the stuff except for the background and I right-click and pre-compose it, and and I just say letter animation, now I have an animation here that is basically just like a flattened out version. So now I can do whatever I want with it, and it won't affect the other stuff. So if I just scoot that over to where I think it looks better, now it works, okay? And I can position that wherever I need to. I could even scale it down if I think it might be too big and I want to add maybe other stuff to the scene. And I can scoot it over again because now it's smaller. There we go. Okay, now I didn't touch the backgrounds because I don't want to resize the backgrounds. The backgrounds are perfect the way they were. I just want to take that whole animation and adjust it. If I need to tweak the animation, I can jump back to my letter animation and tweak anything I need to right here. If I need to adjust my boom, I don't like the colors, I can go to my boom color, I can go to my stroke here, and I can make this a different color. I can go to my streak color. There it is. Wait for it to be on screen. There it is. Gorgeous. And then adjust this color as well. Maybe even, I don't like these pointy parts too much. So I will say rounded caps, round joins. There we go. So now everything's rounded. All right, so then I just go back to my title sequence, and now I have everything updated. The only issue I'm going to have with this, because I shrunk it too much, is that my lettering is off the screen. Okay, so right here, it's cut off. So After Effects is really cool in the fact that it can remember all the stuff that we've done to it, and it can remember that, hey, this stuff is here, but it still exists like somewhere else. So if I go to my toggle switches and modes, and I turn on this continuously rasterize button, what it does is it goes back and it says, ignore the size of that comp, just bring it in like everything that you see. And that's what it's doing. It's bringing in the entire comp as we see it. So now the entire thing fits in there and everything still works. Okay? So it's really cool how we can basically create these assets and reuse these over and over again. If for some reason your name changed, you are no longer Sean, you're Mike, you can go into your letter animation, you can go to your S letter, you can make that an M. Of course, why did I pick Mike? Your name is Zohan. There we go, perfect. There we go, cool. And then we just go back to our animation and look at, perfect. Zohan. And then, of course, we can go into each one of our spots where we would have some sort of stuff. And we can add motion blur across the board. Some of these aren't going to have a whole lot of motion blur to them, but like the Zohan does. Right, when that comes out. Cool. Okay, and obviously I could have done a longer name, but then I have to animate or edit that animation so that it all fits. Okay, so this is the next part of this I want you to create. It's just a little title that just says your name on there. Okay, so it could be your first name, it could be your last name, just one of those types of things. Okay, obviously pick something that's going to fit on the screen nicely. I'm trying to think of big last names. This isn't a crazy big last name, but it's like the first one on the list. So one of my students, it's already too big. There you go. Actually, Nikki, you have a long name. Guardiola, right? That's like a long name. Sarcona's a long name too. My dad's name is Thomas Sarcona. Look how long that is. Okay, so it's like way too long to even try to fit on here. So obviously you find something that's going to fit nicely on the screen and be kind of effective in what we're doing. Okay, and obviously you want to save your stuff. You can save it right into that same project folder we were working on last time. 2200, title bumper, Sarcona, title 01. Cool. So by next class, you should try to plan on having this part done. So you have this. We're going to add some other stuff to this just to enhance it a little bit more, add a little bit more blip stuff. Then we're going to create another title sequence of other stuff too. Okay.